Hey gentlemen, welcome to your first video session with Mr. Morrissey online before class. So this is going to be start to be your homework a little more often to be prepared for class ahead of time. So today I'm going to introduce you to a new note-taking form, and then we're going to talk about chemical and physical properties. Okay. So the first thing you're going to do today, after you've finished your lab, the size of a molecule, you're going to go to Cornell Notes on today's date in Edsby and download it, please. Okay? You will find that it looks something like this. Okay? So quickly, I'm just going to go over what I expect of you. So today, as you're watching this video, we're going to go into chemical and physical properties in a minute, and you're going to use this page to take the notes on it. Okay? So just a quick overview of how this page works. The first thing you want to do is write in your topic or objective in the top left. So today we're just going to be talking about chemical and physical properties. Okay, you'll put your name in and the date. Just like that. Okay? Your essential question for today is, how can we use chemical and physical properties to identify substances? Okay, so this is your essential question for the day. We're gonna go over chemical and physical properties, and then when you come to class, you'll be ready to do the lab in which we actually get to identify substances using these chemical and physical properties. Okay, so at this point now you would continue to watch this video on chemical and physical properties and take notes. So any of the notes that you're going to take can go in here. You can add pictures, right? Just take point form notes, whatever you need to do to help you understand the information. Okay? Now, obviously, and again, while you're taking those notes, please pause, rewind, fast forward, whatever you need to do to understand this to the best of your ability. Okay? Now, if you have questions, as I'm sure will happen, they go over here. Okay? So any questions, you can bring them back to class and ask them then. Okay? So you're not going to ask them right away, but you have this place where you can write them down, think about them, maybe they'll be answered later on. If not, then you bring them to class and ask. Okay? And then you've got them right there. And the last piece, you're going to summarize, put it all together. Okay? So you're going to write in, you're going to start with an introductory sentence. Okay? What was the goal here? What were you learning? Okay? 3 sentences to support that. So, what did you learn? What were the things that you learned to support that? And then a concluding statement. Okay? So you're looking at 5 sentences, summarizing sort of a day's notes. You can even add some questions in here if there were questions that you really didn't know and that you weren't sure about. Okay, but this is really important. This is what I'm going to look at to sort of help me understand how much you got out of everything. Okay, and then when we sort of bring it all back together in class, you can ask the questions. You've got your notes right there in front of you. So you're going to put these Cornell notes in your chemistry section right under the physical and chemical properties. Okay, and this is what we're going to talk about today. Okay, and this is something you're going to use a lot in science the rest of the way. Okay, the properties of a substance go a long way in helping us understand what it is, what it does, how it can be useful for us. Okay, so the physical properties themselves, they're very straightforward. They just describe the characteristics of a substance that we can measure or observe. Okay, And the types of observations that we use, we've already talked a lot about these, are quantitative or qualitative. Okay, the quantitative ones, obviously we're talking about numbers. Okay, that's where the word quality comes from, or comes from the word quality. And here, just physical observations, qualities. Okay, and now this is important. You can use quantitative and qualitative for both physical and chemical properties. Okay, so we're going to start today with physical properties, and there's two categories, right? You've got the quantitative, which are qualities, and qualitative. Okay, very observable, the qualities that you see. Okay, so some examples here: quantitative, things that we can measure, okay, of any sort of substance. The first one is conductivity. Okay, so does it conduct heat or electricity? Okay, and this usually applies to metals often, but does it conduct electricity? That's our key there. And all that is the movement of electrons. Okay, so conductivity, quantitative, because we can measure in numbers that conductivity. And the second is density, and you should probably remember from density, but the formula for density is just mass over volume. Okay, or m over v. Okay, so it's the amount of mass in a volume. Okay, and again, you're going to get a number here, usually grams per liter or grams per centimeter squared, or cubed, sorry. You may get grams per milliliter. These are generally the units that we use for density. So again, another way, how much mass goes in a certain amount of volume. So again, you would just, take the mass of a substance, measure the volume of it, divide the mass by the volume, and you get the density. So again, another quantitative property. The last one we're going to talk about today in terms of quantitative is the hardness. And that's how easy it is to resist being scratched. We do have a way to measure this. I'm not going to go into the details of that, but just know hardness, again, is another physical property. Right? It's not something, it doesn't have to do with chemical reactions. It's something that we sort of observe, but we observe it using sort of numbers. So that's the thing. So the characteristics, the physical characteristics of a substance. Now in terms of qualitative, now these are things that we just observe. We don't measure them. Okay? And the first is color or luster. And these go back to the optics unit. Okay? And they're all determined by the amount of light a substance reflects. Okay, so if you remember, a red substance is going to reflect red light and absorb the other types of light. Okay, and then something that sort of shines really, reflects a lot of light, has lots of luster. Okay, so it is lustrous. Something shiny is considered lustrous. Okay, so the more luster, the more shine. Alrighty. Next you have ductility, and so you're just stretching. So the ability is to stretch something. So it's things like wire. Okay, you can stretch copper it's very ductile because it stretches into wire very easily. Things like Play-Doh, they stretch, right? Neoprene or elastic bands, they stretch a lot, so they're very ductile. So stretchy equals ductile. Okay. The third qualitative physical property we're going to talk about is malleability, and that's flattened or molded. So can you mold something? Okay, so can you mold it? So the more moldable it is, the more malleable it is. So something that breaks and is brittle won't be very malleable, but something that you can mold, the more malleable it is. And the last but not least is viscosity, and that's the resistance of a fluid to flow. So the thicker something is, the more viscous it is. So the harder it is to flow, the more viscous. So these are all physical properties, okay? Very important in terms of, observing and determining what type of substance we have. Okay, we're going to use these a lot, especially in next class in the lab. You're going to be using these, comparing them to an unknown substance to try and determine what that unknown substance is. Okay, so these are things you can use with your eyes. You can physically make those things happen, but these are the important sort of key properties you're looking for when you're trying to determine a substance. Okay? These are not the only ways that we determine a substance, though. The other type are chemical properties. And this is just basically, they describe the reactivity. Okay? So we're going to investigate this a little bit more. We're going to talk about physical, chemical changes. But really, all the chemical property is how does the substance react chemically. So, for example, something like magnesium is very reactive in water. Okay, so that would be a chemical property of water, or of magnesium. It's also an example of a chemical change, which we will talk about. But the fact that it does that, it's this, what it reacts with, sort of determines its chemical property. So, what and how does a substance react? So in the lab, next class, you are going to get a chance to do some chemical reactions, and you're going to record the results, so your observations of those reactions. And those are going to be examples of chemical properties. If something reacts with one thing, it will be a chemical change. And then you're going to be able to talk about, what substance it is, what are the properties of those things. So you're going to be combining the qualitative and quantitative physical properties with the chemical properties to determine the results and determine what substances you have. Okay? So hopefully you've been able to take really good Cornell notes today. Hopefully you have a really good now understanding of physical and chemical properties. If you have questions, make sure they go in that left-hand column of the Cornell notes right here. Again, so questions right in this section. You can bring those to class and ask them before we start the lab. Okay? Enjoy, gentlemen. I hope the lab goes very well. I will be around to answer any questions. Thank you.